After a horrible 0-2 start, Giants fans have some serious concerns about the lack of offensive production and the course of the season. Fielding some questions from the members of the Big Blue Huddle website, I'll be discussing these concerns with one of the premier beat writers covering the New York Football Giants, Patricia Traina. Patty is the senior editor and Giants beat writer for InsideFootball.com. Patty also covers the Giants as a featured columnist for the Bleacher Report, the Sports Exchange, and the Journal-Inquirer of Central Connecticut. This is Ed, and welcome to the podcast.
Okay.
Good evening, Patty. How you doing tonight?
Very well, Ed. Thanks so much for having me on tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So you must have had an interesting week. You certainly had a lot of material to work with, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I kind of laugh when some fans say that the media lives for the Giants to lose like this, and I got to be honest with you. Speaking for myself, it creates double the work. It's not pleasant. You know, Twitter, which, you know, as I'm sure you know, I'm very active on Twitter, can be a very unfriendly, hostile environment, even though, you know, what's going on is not necessarily my fault. But yeah, it's some rough times, and who knows how this is all going to shake out.
You know, as someone who's out there and accessible to the fans of the Twitter world, I'm sure you come across many different reactions when a season starts out like this. There's so many different levels of fans. There's the ones like that will catch a game now and then. Then there's the fan who gets involved, you know, because they're keeping up with the news. Maybe they do fantasy football, you know, watch all the games at home. Some go to the stadium in person. They have season tickets. Some, you know, at that point even voice their opinions on Twitter, Facebook, bulletin boards, like the Giants refer to as bulletin boards. We call them message boards. I find there's a lot more voice out there, though, when things go badly than when things go well, and I guess it's just a factor of human nature.
Well, I mean, I can understand it. It's interesting because when I see letters to the editor, when I see bulletin board posts, even Twitter tweets, a lot of the fans consider themselves and the Giants as one. So I see a lot of we.
Yes.
And it's so funny because, you know, when I was just starting out, you know, as a journalist, I used to refer to myself and the Giants as we until I was corrected by a senior journalist who said to me, no, you can't be we with the Giants. You have to be independent. And ever since then, I've kind of separated myself to where, you know, win or lose, you still got a job to do. You still have to write about it. You still have to be objective. But, you know, the fans, because they have the merchandise, they have a rooting interest, they have a passion or what have you, they you know, it's we. And it's one big, you know, happy or in this case unhappy family. And I understand it and I appreciate the passion they bring to it. I think sometimes, you know, in times like this, their ire is misplaced. Like, I see them lashing out at myself and other beat writers, and all they do is bring you the news and the analysis. I mean, we're not the ones making the decisions, you know, who's going to call the plays, who's going to play offensive line, who's going to do this. So, you know, but it's part of the job, I guess.
Well, they look at you as you're part of the Giants because it's different now than the way it was reported years ago. You know, you're on all the time with Twitter and everything else that you do. So they actually associate you with the Giants. But I also think that it's unhealthy for a fan to refer to the team as we. There's got to be a separation there. It doesn't make you any less of a fan. But when you put your self-esteem into a team and they lose, that dumps on you too. So you can't get too high with the highs, too low with the lows. And right now, a lot of fans have already been very critical of this second-year head coach, Ben McAdoo. Many were very disappointed in the way Coughlin was treated, and they felt he was forced out. They don't like the fact that he's calling his own plays now because they haven't been successful. They don't like the play selection, very critical. Everybody's a coach, and they don't like his game management. Some are calling him a player's coach. Some say he rode the coattails of an improved defensive roster. And now with the addition of so many weapons and support players like Marshall, Ingram, Ellison, Smith, DJ Fluker, they feel that he's wasting the opportunity for a great season, and Eli's window's closing fast. Can you comment on that from your perspective?
Yeah, it's funny. People always are going to be critical about something, and it's funny. I've seen a lot of criticism about Eli Manning and how he's declining, and I'm not disputing that. But with that said, I tell people regarding Eli, you're going to miss him when he's gone. Just like I said this about Phil Simms. Now, back then there was no Twitter. There was, blogs. I think were in their infancy. You got to appreciate what you have. Now, as far as Ben McAdoo is concerned, I think Ben is a good football coach. I think he has a plan. I don't necessarily agree with everything he does. I don't necessarily agree with, what he has done this week. Calling out Eli Manning and not calling out Eric Flowers, who had probably just as bad, if not worse, a game. But I do understand why he did what he did. And, when I look at this, I try to look at both sides of the coin. And it's interesting because Eli Manning talked about that today in the locker room. He said, look, I've been in New York for 14 years. I've heard every type of criticism you can imagine. This is not a big deal to me. Whereas, you have someone like Eric Flowers, who maybe, now I'm just speculating here because he doesn't really talk to the media. He's very standoffish and avoids us like the plague. But my impression of him is he's a very sensitive guy. And I know what some of you are thinking when you hear this. You're saying, well, there's no room for crying in baseball, or in this case, being sensitive in football. But I think what McAdoo is trying to do is two things. Number one, show the team that, hey, even Eli is not immune to criticism. And B, he's also trying to kind of encourage Flowers so that he doesn't lose him. I don't necessarily agree with the approach, but I understand and see what he's doing.
Well, going back and thinking about Bill Parcells and Rich, Mighty Giants, Rich has mentioned this, a couple of times to me, and I can quote him. He coached the players the way they needed to be coached. If he had to call Phil Simms a she, he did it. He had to jump down someone's throat. So, maybe it's just a case of he's got some insight into how he needs to deal with some personalities to get them motivated. I know a lot of people may not like that. They look at that and they say, oh, he's throwing Eli under the bus. But, you made a great point, and Eli said it. Look, he's a big boy, He could take criticism. He's been in this league for 14 years. So...
Yeah, I mean, with Eric Flowers, again, I don't know him well enough because, again, he has chosen to kind of shut himself off from the media. But at the same time, hey, you're in New York. You're a big boy now. I don't want to hear he's only 23 years old. This is the path you've chosen. So, therefore, that doesn't make you immune to any kind of criticism to your game. If you can't take it, then go get another line of work. I mean, that's how I feel. I tend to be more, old school. I like the Parcells approach. I don't necessarily believe in handling people with kid gloves if you're in a position. You got to be honest with them. You can't sit there and say, oh, Eric, you did some good things in the game, but we got to clean up a couple little things, but you're on the right path, You're talking about jobs here. You're talking about livelihood. And look, either correct it now or at the end of the year when a decision has to be made on Flowers' rookie option, which will have to be made by next May, he's going to get a slap in the face, a dose of reality if they don't pick it up. So isn't it better to be honest, even if it means being brutally honest? I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but that's how I would kind of approach it.
Well, I think at some point, if he feels he has to make a move, and that's a question we were tossing around today with a bunch of the folks. Does he have complete autonomy? Does Coach Ben McAdoo have complete autonomy on how he runs that team? If he needs to make a decision at left tackle and say, you know what, Eric, maybe you need to sit for a few games and we need to give you a little break here. We're going to try something different. Would he make that decision? Does he have the autonomy, in your opinion, to do that, or is this something where this has to be a collective decision between himself, Jerry Reese, and the owners, where they're going to make a big decision like that while you're in the middle of the season and you don't have a lot of other options than disrupting your offensive line and maybe moving a Justin Pugh to left tackle, or you would have to start a Chad Wheeler at left tackle who's a rookie, and that would be an embarrassment to Eric Flowers.
To answer your first question about having autonomy, I do think, thanks to Ben McAdoo winning 11 games last year and getting them to the playoffs, he probably does have a little bit more say. Actually, let me back up a little bit. I've always been under the impression that it's been a group, a collaborative effort. That there's, and I don't know this for a fact, I'm just kind of giving you my thoughts here, but I've always thought it's a collaborative effort between the GM and the coach as to what roster decisions they make on a week-by-week basis. I think Ben McAdoo, again, because he won 11 games last year, he might have a little bit more autonomy to do what he wants, what he feels is best. Would he make a move to sit Eric Flowers? I would not rule that out, actually. I know I've said on Twitter that, what options are there? But you know what? I was thinking about it before we actually, started recording this podcast, and there are some directions they can go in. It's not the ideal direction, but there are some things that McAdoo can do with that offensive line. Unfortunately, it's going to necessitate maybe moving multiple positions around, which you really don't want to do at this point. But, there are options. They're not the best ones out there, but unfortunately, like I've told people, Joe Thomas isn't going to come riding in.
Right.
Neither is Daly, neither is probably Dwayne Brown from Houston. So they have to, if they have an answer, it's got to come from what they have right now, because if they were that down on everybody, or that they would have made a move, to bring somebody in off the street. And apparently, they have workouts every week, and I don't know which offensive line they've worked out, but I'm sure they've worked out some. And apparently, nobody has jumped out at them to say, "Hey, let's go with this guy instead."
They feel they have the best players in the right positions on the field right now. But if that changes, I would hope that Jerry Reese would support any decision that Ben McAdoo makes, because this is Ben McAdoo's career. If this year, if they tank after what happened last year and all of the weapons that were brought in this year, it's not going to look good. The fans were booing. I was at the game on Sunday. You were at the game on Sunday. It was bad. They were booing the Giants off the field at halftime. He didn't manage the clock well with his timeouts, And again, I'm a fan criticizing the head coach of the New York Giants, but you know what? We see things from a different perspective, and he's got that menu board out there, and he's calling the plays. Now, he said he might relinquish that. Sid and DuPont had asked a question, and he wanted to know, if you were the head coach, what would you do to fix the offensive line? So this is from your perspective. He was hoping that you would maybe take a look at a series of steps that you might take. And is this group stronger than last year? What would you like to see as the starting offensive line for this team right now? And why would you do that? If you feel uncomfortable answering that because of relationships, I understand it. Go as far as you think you can.
Well, first off, is this group is stronger than last year? This is the same group, really. The same starters for most of last year. Well,
collectively, though, you have Fluker, you have Wheeler.
I'll say this. Fluker came in here and, as a reclamation project for them, and that he never really got any first-team reps, to me, was a surprise. And I think that was also a very telling statement.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a concern with me. Now, as far as fixing the line, you've got to remember now, I have not seen a full practice since, I want to say, the day before the last preseason game. So it's been a couple of weeks. Guys, I'm sure, have improved. I don't know how far along Chad Wheeler has come in his development, for example. I do know that they like him, hence why he is on the roster. I know there was a time during the game Monday night where Mike Solari was seen chatting with Chad Wheeler. What that conversation was about, I couldn't tell you because obviously, I wasn't there. I was miles away. But it was interesting that he was having a conversation with him. So I have to think that they might be getting him ready or trying to expedite getting him ready. Now, where would they put him? That I couldn't tell you. Could they put him at right tackle, I suppose, and maybe move Justin Pugh over to the left side? Sure, why not? Could they maybe go into, could they take a whole different approach and say, you know what, we got to give Eli a head start here. We can't keep relying on these 3-step drops, so maybe we do more shotgun, to help minimize, the problems on the offensive line. That could be an option too. So.
Well, what would you do though? I think he wanted to know what you would like. If it was up to me, I would have Justin Pugh at left tackle. I'm assuming Bobby Hart's going to get better in the next week or so, and that he's going to be he'll be fine.
So sure. Really? I'm not so sure about that, Ed, because Bobby Hart was limping very noticeably today. So
it could be several weeks. It's possible.
I don't know that. I mean, obviously it's early in the week, but my guess is after he went out there last week or on Monday night and re-injured that ankle after 2 plays, I would be very surprised if he plays Sunday. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, so you're the head coach. Do you trot out Justin Pugh on that side? Because Pro Football Focus did not rate him well. He did get pushed back quite a bit, but he held his ground and he maintained as best he could that pocket. I don't think that he was the problem. He didn't really give up a sack that I saw. Or would you put a DJ Fluker out there at right tackle?
I wouldn't put Fluker at right tackle. I think what I would probably do, and I've got to think. I'm going to think through this here out loud. I would maybe Eric Flowers is going to be the left tackle. Ben McAdoo has said that. I would get him chip help because I don't think they gave him much help against Ansah last week. And, they got to get him help. That much we can all agree on. Now, if you look at the Eagles this week, they've got Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, on the left side. So they're going up against the right side of that offensive line, John Jerry and Justin Pugh. That's where I would probably make a move there. I might say to myself, okay, maybe I pull Jerry and I put Fluker in there if he is ready to go. And maybe I put Jerry on the other side for Brett Jones. And the reason why I say that is I like Brett Jones. He's a plugger. He's a smart player. But you put him next to Weston Richburg and you don't really have, ideal size. So I would want to beef up the interior of that offensive line because right now the Giants don't have a running back that can get to the edges. They're basically a between the tackle type of group. And they're not getting, Orleans Starkwa is having better success, but on the whole, they're not able to get through the creases and the offensive line is not blowing guys off the ball.
Right.
So I beef up that interior. I would move... like I said, I would put Fluker maybe in at right guard, maybe swing Jerry over to the left side.
Mm-hmm.
I just...
Well, the Chief...
I would go beefing it up.
One of the posters, the Chief, one of his questions, because it ties right into or segues into what you were talking about, why isn't Rhett Ellison on the field more? All he does is block well and he catches passes. That's something that would be the player that would be giving Eric Flowers help on that left side also, right? And you do take out a receiver when you do that, unless he's chipping and going out. But
not necessarily. See, the thing you got to remember, first of all, McAdoo was asked about that today, and he said, well, we haven't had as many plays on offense. But you can also have a running back do some chipping. See, I think... I don't remember if I spoke about this with you back in the summer or if I wrote it somewhere. I apologize because I've written and talked about this so much. I lose track of who I've said what to. But the thing you've got to remember here, this team kept the fullback. And the fullback, as you know, is generally used to help with the interior, whereas a tight end is probably better suited to handle the exterior,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
defensive lines, the outside linebackers, and so on and so forth. What I don't understand, and again, when I look at how this team is made up, I look at it almost as a patchwork as opposed to one solid pattern. You have an offensive line that doesn't really complement the quarterback. You have, you have a fullback who doesn't blow guys off the ball when he gets into the hole. I mean, he gets in the way, but he's not going to blow guys back out of the hole. You have a blocking tight end who is who's decent enough against those defensive ends, but, put him in motion and ask him to block as an H-back, and I don't think he's as effective as he could be. So I see a lot of patches on that offense, and the patches don't necessarily complement each other. And that's, to me, that's an overall concern I would have.
There was one of our members who mentioned that he felt that the O-line issues, even though they're well documented, they're far from the only issue. What changes would you like to see, or do you see happening this week as the Giants try to reduce penalties, missed tackles, poor punts, coverage issues, that type of thing? Where, you know what, Ben McAdoo said they're having trouble getting out of their own way. Now, I don't know if he meant that literally or figuratively. Is this team ready? Were they ready? Were they overconfident coming into this season? Did he mean that, or they're just getting? It's just the fact that this was a winnable game, and they just gave that game away against Detroit on Sunday because if you look at the stats, it wasn't for production issues. It was mistakes that killed that game.
Yeah, I agree with you. They do make mistakes. They do shoot themselves in the foot. Do I think that they believe their own press clippings? That's a hard one for me to answer. It would look that way because, you look at the Patriots, for example, and do they, I think back to the summer when the Giants were having their dance parties and keeping it loose, and, that's all well and good. I get why you do that, but did you see the Patriots doing that? Did you see very many other teams doing that stuff?
Good point.
I understand the concept behind it. You want to have fun. You want to enjoy your workplace. You want to bond with your teammates. But, you sit back and I know hindsight's 20/20, and you say to yourself, well, gee, while they were, screwing around like that, could they have been watching film together instead, or could they have been doing something different? And again, I'm going based off of a few, Instagram videos. I don't know, because during the summer we were not allowed in the building except for the press room. So we were not allowed in the locker room to see who was doing what, and we don't know necessarily how the day was structured. But to me, that was just kind of I don't know, in retrospect, kind of a bad look, because how many other teams that are now, doing well did you see doing that, if assuming you followed all that stuff?
Good point. And Bill Belichick is a really good example because they have come out of success many times to start all over with a fresh season, and he's got to get these guys refocused, and they can't be complacent because of what they did last year. It's a new team, it's new competition. You've had defensive and offensive coordinators studying your game plan. You've got to make changes in your roster, and you've got to make changes in your game plan too. But you've got to get that mental aspect of the game. You got to get those players prepared, and he seems to be able to do it every year. Now we've got a coach. He's learning. Look, he's got experience, and he's a very, very intelligent man, and he's got a great football mind. But it's his second year as the head coach. And there's a learning curve, too. You have to go through a lot of situations. Coughlin went through it. So it's just, it's a case of maybe they weren't mentally prepared to go into this season. Maybe they were a little lackadaisical. Maybe they were too confident. I know they were very serious about what they were doing. They probably worked very hard. But there's something, that is said for going in with the right attitude and the right work mentality. And that's what you're saying. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, with Ben McAdoo, again, I don't think he's a bad football coach. What I think, though, is he bit off a little bit more than I think he could chew with being the head coach and the play caller. And I'll go back to what happened with Eli, how he called Eli out and said hey, he should have called a timeout. Well, last I checked, the head coach can also call a timeout too.
Right.
And I thought to myself, well, gee, if you didn't have your face in that big menu card, and I know it was a fourth down play, but still, maybe McAdoo's looking at the card and saying, okay, do we go for 2 when we score, or do we go for 1? What should we do? Maybe he's thinking ahead. But I'm saying, if he didn't have that card in his hand, and he was able to, keep his eye on the clock and keep his eye on what was going on, maybe he could have said, hey, let's call the timeout. Maybe he could have jumped in there. So I just think that being his own play caller, he's a little too, it's kind of like a writer. I'll put it to you this way. It's kind of like when you write an article or you write a story and you're so close to it and you think it's the greatest thing you've ever written, that it's crystal clear, it's worthy of a Pulitzer Prize. And then you put it out there and people read it and they can't make heads or tails of it. They find all kinds of mistakes with it. And you're sitting there and suddenly it's a slap in the face because to you it's a work of art.
Right.
That's because you're close to it. It came from your mind, and in your mind, and when you look at it, it makes all the sense in the world, and it's perfect. So that's how I kind of see what's going on with McAdoo here. It's his offense. He knows what he wants to accomplish and why he wants to accomplish it and how to get there, but it's just not coming together. And that's the frustrating thing. So sometimes when that happens, you've got to step aside. Just like when writing something, you have to step aside, let somebody else put their eyes on it, let somebody else proofread it, and say, hey, instead of writing it this way, why don't you try writing this, or take this angle instead. You got to get that feedback, and you've got to incorporate more of that. And I just don't get the sense that that's what's been happening with the Giants. And, unfortunately, the proof has been in the pudding. They've gone 8 games now, scoring less than 20 points. And that's not by accident.
It also speaks to the fans about his confidence, perhaps, in Sullivan. And it's probably way off base, but you have an offensive coordinator. Why wouldn't you allow him to call the play so that you could see the big picture? On Sunday, in the second quarter, as time was running out, they had a passing play and a running play where that clock was running when he had 3 timeouts, I believe, and he didn't use 2 of those timeouts. So that at the end, he just let the clock run out. He did a running play, and then they trotted off, into the tunnel, where he might have had an opportunity to move for a score at that time before the half.
Yeah. And then one other point I'll make about Sullivan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Sullivan's been with Eli, if I'm not mistaken, since the very beginning. Or if not since the beginning, for a number of years, far more years than McAdoo.
Right. He left to go to
right. He spent a couple of years in Tampa Bay.
Right.
Then he was out of football 1 year, and then he came back. But my point is Sullivan knows Eli probably as well as anybody on that team, McAdoo included. He knows how Eli has developed because he developed him. Remember, Sullivan was once the quarterback's coach. So he worked with Eli when Eli was a young quarterback. He knows what Eli is capable of doing. He also has a good idea of how Eli has progressed and what he can probably do now and what he can't do. I'm not saying McAdoo doesn't, but Sullivan knows Eli. I mean, I'm sure the two of them can finish each other's sentences. So why wouldn't you say to Sullivan, okay, you know what? I'm going to let you take a crack at calling the plays because you have that deeper relationship with Eli than I do. Right now, again, just based on what I see on the sidelines, I think what's happening is Sullivan will talk to Eli and then, bring the information back to McAdoo to make a decision. And I think you've got to eliminate that middleman. Let Sullivan call the plays, and then when the offense is off the field, Sullivan can huddle up with Eli and have Ben in the huddle as well while the defense is doing their thing. This way Ben doesn't have to, sit there and worry about, okay, what am I going to do on the next series? You know what I'm saying? It just makes it unclogs right now what I perceive to be a logjam in the offensive play calling process.
We have a fella, his name is Dale, and his handle is AP44. He's an ex-college quarterback. He knows a lot about the quarterback game. And, well, his question was, would the Giants be better off running a fast-paced offense with Eli calling the plays and, you know, having a game plan script with the power to run what he wants to? Or even just maybe at certain times of the game just say, okay, Eli, you know, 2-minute offense, this is your game. Do it. Just do it. I don't know that will ever happen, you know, in a New York Giants uniform, but...
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I think what happens, the way they've set it up is McAdoo calls the personnel and sends out, whether it's 11 personnel, 12 personnel, what have you. Eli has the authority to change the play if he needs to. If, you know, the defense is giving him a look and he says, you know what, this original play isn't going to work, I'm going to have to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Eli has that change, but I could be wrong. But I think what Dale is probably hinting around or tiptoeing around is the 2-minute drill that, you know, the Giants seem to run so well because it just takes a lot of you know, options out of it and simplifies things. And you can't run that throughout the entire game. You just can't do that. So, you know, I know I'm getting off the question there a little bit, but I think Eli does have some leeway as to what is called, but he's not the one who's telling McAdoo, hey, send out 11 personnel, send out 12 personnel. That's coming from the sideline, and it's up to Eli to you know, get them in the best possible look to match up what the defense is showing them and get the right competitive advantage. And that's why I think you often see the clock run down to the nub, so to speak. And, you know, that's why you have a lot of, a lot of those delay of game penalties. I know Eli was better with them last year, but already, you know, he started with them this year. And you know, that hopefully he curtails those.
Well, there's a lot of questions related to what we're talking about. MP21 had asked a question, why so many passes fall short of the first down marker? Is it the play calling, poor route running? Is it Eli? You know, I think it's just a matter of, you know, who's open. Bob in PA says he believes it's too early to write anyone off, but do you believe it would help the running game to replace Marshall with a second tight end for the majority of the plays? Also, wouldn't the 21 personnel package be more useful in giving Flowers help with his pass protection because one tight end or running back would chip before running his route? All of these are related. And then it all goes back to Eli getting, you know, a lot of criticism. There's rumblings out there about him being past his prime or he's settled into mediocrity. You've been commenting, and again, you said it again tonight, that everybody will miss Eli when he's gone, and I agree with you. What are your feelings on the timeline to either develop Davis Webb or for him to compete for a starting role next season, or maybe draft a quarterback next year in a rich draft class if this year, God forbid, if the losing trend continues?
I think Eli, at minimum, is going to be the quarterback for another year here, not counting this year. I think he will be here as a starter next year. I'm not sure that Davis Webb is going to be ready to supplant him by next year. What I do think you will see with Davis Webb is, and I said this at the start of the year, I think at some point Davis Webb will jump ahead of Geno Smith as the number 2 guy. He may even get into a game, you know, in garbage time snaps. But right now, Davis Webb is a couple years away, I think, from being ready. He's making great progress. You know, I talk to him every once in a while. The coaches, Signetti, Sullivan, they have spoken highly of him, and you can just see how intent he is, you know, how focused he is. He's really attaching himself to Eli, and he sees how Eli gets ready, and I think that's a good example to have. But I would not count on Davis Webb being ready to start next year. I think maybe next year's 2018. I think maybe by 2019, that is a better possibility.
Where do you think Eli's at right now?
Pardon?
Where do you feel Eli is right now? Do you feel confident in him to be able to take this team to a championship?
I think it's. First of all, I will say I do think there's a little decline in Eli's game. I know a lot of people call me an apologist for Eli, but you have to be blind to see that there's he's lost a little something on his game. Now, with that said, he also hasn't had much cooperation. When his offensive line, he doesn't know where the next leak is going to come and where he's going to get hit from. Can you really blame him for being skittish? Can you blame him for chucking the ball off to the nearest receiver just so he can avoid getting hit? Eli will deny that, but look, it's human nature. I mean, who wants to get hit all the time?
Don't you think he was coached to get rid of the ball and not to take the sack or to fumble the ball?
Yes, to an extent I would say that. But again, I mean, he's getting the ball and literally he's got a guy in his face.
Mm-hmm.
That's how bad the protection's been. So, going back to the question, and I forget who asked it, but they said, well, why aren't guys running past the first down marker?
MP21, yeah.
Okay. I think that's a combination. I think, number one, I put that on the receiver, number one, because, look, if you're running a route and you come up a half a yard or a yard short of the first down marker, that's on the receiver, in my opinion.
That was Brandon Marshall on Sunday, right? He ran a yard short and he didn't get his feet in bounds.
You've got to run to the first down marker. I mean, we write about that all the time in Inside Football, that if you're calling a short route, if you can't go the extra yard or the extra half yard, something's wrong. You're not running that route correctly. So that's what we think, Now, if a guy's running like 4 yards out and he's 6 yards shy of the marker, then that's obviously intentional. That's a check down, or he's targeting a back or something like that. But yeah, the receivers have to do a better job of that. I'm not really sure why they don't run past the first down marker, but that's been a pet peeve of ours, I know, at Inside Football. We wrote about it this week. We've been writing about it several times over the years, and I just don't understand what the thinking is there. I'll have to ask the receiver what the thinking is there, or maybe I'll just see if I can get that question in with Sullivan or McAdoo in the coming weeks. But that is a very good question, though.
Well, many fans have already written Brandon Marshall off. Does the coaching staff share the same concerns that some of these fans do? It's only 2 games. I mean, do you expect him to start and see the majority of the snaps versus Philly? This is London Blues question. I expect him to start, but do you think that there's a concern over Brandon Marshall dropping passes, not running a short route, not stretching his arms out, and there's a couple of issues that there's been snapshots. He didn't get a lot of passes thrown to him the first game. What's your take on Brandon Marshall?
Here's what I see when I look at Brandon Marshall. I see a guy who, to me, and I could be way off on this, that's interesting because I asked this question of Eli and of Marshall, but I see a guy who is not yet comfortable in this offense. And if you remember, Marshall and Manning never hooked up in the preseason. For whatever the reason, they did not have a pass completion between them. I don't think they even had, I want to say they had maybe one pass target and it fell incomplete.
Interesting.
And that was because Marshall, I believe, ran the wrong route. And I remember because that was the one he talked about. And I think he even said, in the jet system, we would have done this, this, and this, and that's not going to happen. And I think that was in the game. I can't remember exactly, but I do remember him talking about it. But I don't see Marshall as being totally comfortable in this offense yet, which I think is part of the problem. Now, with that said, I did ask Eli before the Dallas game, and I asked Marshall, I said, are you guys on the same page? Marshall, of course, said, yes, we are. He looked at me like I had 2 heads. Eli's answer was a little bit more telling, I thought. Eli said, we will be on the same page. He was speaking in terms of the future. He said, it doesn't mean we're going to complete every pass, but we will be on this. And I'm paraphrasing here, by the way. But that, to me, basically said, we're not quite there yet, but we'll get there.
Well, that's very interesting comment. And you know what? It's only a game and a half. They didn't really have a preseason together. So you have that situation with Marshall, Evan Ingram, who's played well so far this past game. But he's a rookie coming in also. So I would have to say that he's nowhere near where he's going to be either. By the way, talking about Evan Ingram, he's got a concussion issue. He's going through concussion protocol. Anything you can comment on that? Any insight in that?
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote this for Inside Football. I believe I wrote it for. Again, I apologize. I've done so much writing today, and I wrote for 3 different publications.
And I thank you for coming on short notice too. I had this idea in the middle of the afternoon. I said, let me.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just sorry because I'm trying to remember who I wrote what for. So when people want to go and read what I wrote, I'm steering them to the right paper. But I believe I wrote it for Inside Football, and what I said was, I talked to Evan Ingram both in a group and then after the game, and to me, he looked fine. Now, what I'm wondering happened is, did he develop symptoms, like in the last couple of days that had them concerned, which I know has happened. That's what happened with Keenan Robinson. Remember, he was cleared from the protocol. He went out, he practiced, and then the symptoms came back.
Maybe he got dizzy during practice, that kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, sometimes that does happen.
Vertigo.
And when you're talking about a concussion, obviously, you don't want to mess around. You want to make sure that you jump on that. So I don't blame the Giants for being cautious with Evan Ingram. Was I surprised to hear about it? Yes, because like I said, I talked to him for a little bit after the game, one-on-one, and he seemed fine to me. And I in the course of my career, I've spoken to guys who were concussed and didn't necessarily know about it because they just had that far-off glazed look in their eye. And to me, Ingram didn't have that, but then again, I haven't finished my medical degree yet, so who am I to diagnose anything?
Okay. Tim 2000 has a question, and it relates to what I believe is the biggest problem with the offense, and I believe it's the inability to effectively run the football is really one of the biggest problems with that offense. So Tim's question, and it would be Brian's question if he was on here, what is the status of Wayne Gallman, and what are the chances he gets some quality touches, and how come he has not been involved in the offense? Is it a matter of, although we've seen him do very well in the preseason in pass protection, is there a reason why he's not getting involved in the game plan?
Yeah, yes, I would say the answer to that is yes. He had some drop passes, number one. He also looked he looked tentative when running the game, and I know he had some missed assignments in the preseason. I mean, you got to remember, Wayne Gallman is a rookie. He was, a 4th-round draft pick?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes him a day 3 pick. He's going to need a little time to get his feet underneath him. Now, remember, though, Paul Perkins was also a day 3 pick, if I remember correctly, and he started to come on towards the end of the year. I think Wayne Gallman is going to take a similar path. We might even see him sooner than we did Perkins last year. But you got to give this kid time. There's some kinks in his game that they have to work out. And he's a very, he's a hardworking kid. I like him a lot. I actually had him mocked to the Giants in round 4, so I'm very proud that I hit that pick. So I think he's going to be fine, but right now he's just not ready to go in there and make a contribution. Regarding the running game, I've been saying this since the preseason, even before. One of the problems I had with Ben McAdoo is he named Paul Perkins the starter in March, before free agency, before the draft, before getting him on the field to see just how much he had improved. I thought that was a mistake. Again, I understand why he did it and what his motivation was, but I thought that was a mistake. And sure enough, I'm not saying Paul Perkins is resting on his laurels, but he is currently averaging, I believe, 1.9 yards per carry.
He didn't earn it, is what you're saying, and
Pardon?
He didn't earn it, and
Right.
and there was no competition at that position because it was given to him.
Exactly. And this is this is one of the larger issues that I disagree with McAdoo on, and that is when he says we treat everybody differently. You cannot do that if you are a coach. That is just such. I'm sorry. I like Ben, but I vehemently disagree with that approach. You can't treat everybody differently. You don't have a Lawrence Taylor on that team. If you had a Lawrence Taylor on that team, then I can see giving him preferential treatment. But you don't have that. So
Well, he has an Odell.
Okay, but Odell, all right, granted, but Odell right now he's dealing with an injury.
Well, I got a question about that.
But my point is, again, you don't have a team full of Lawrence Taylors or Odell Beckhams. I mean, is anybody going to sit there and tell me that Paul Perkins is in the same category as a Lawrence Taylor?
No, yeah, I agree with you. I agree.
So
with you.
I just don't understand. I should rephrase that. I understand what he was trying to do. I don't agree with what he did. And now, with Orleans Stark was starting to show that he's able to make more behind the same offensive line that Perkins is running behind. Now that decision's looking pretty stupid, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I do have an Odell question.
Okay.
Okay, because this was brought up and the reason why Odell did not play last week and he spent another week was it truly medical or did they go to him and he said, well, I'm not quite there yet, and maybe he was a little skittish about getting involved in the game. I think it's just a matter of just them being smart, but there was some folks out there that you heard them, you read them. There was a lot of comments that Odell, for whatever reason, his contract or whatever, that he was being resistant to going out for that first game. I don't believe it, but any insight in that?
Not at all. Odell lives to play football.
That's what I say.
He wanted to be out there. I think what people need to understand when it comes to injuries is that there is a process. And what that process is the medical team looks at the player, they watch him warm up, go through drills, and what they have to answer, is will the player make his injury worse if we clear him to play? And if the answer is yes, they're going to go to the head coach and to the GM and say, we don't think this guy should play. It's as simple as that. It really is. Because how many times have you heard a player who's been injured? And Bobby Hart's a perfect example. Bobby Hart sprained his ankle, made it through the game. The following week, I'm going to play. No question about it. I'm going to go out there and play. Well, he went out there and he played, and guess what? He lasted 2 plays, and he was right back on the sideline. He aggravated that injury. How many times have you heard a player say, I'm going to play, and then he goes out there and he either looks like garbage or he can't make it through the game or he makes the injury worse?
Doesn't it hurt the team to that game? Because now instead of practicing all week with Justin Pugh at right tackle, they've had Bobby Hart out there in practice. Maybe Justin Pugh would have been more prepared. Maybe, if Odell had done the same thing, they would have game planned for Odell being in that game, and then he couldn't play. Or if he got hurt, now he's out 6 weeks. It's a great point.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so I think we went through all of the offensive questions. I have a question here about Steve Spagnuolo's defense, and certainly wasn't the cause of the last 2 losses. How would you describe the defensive style of Steve Spagnuolo? And have you seen any changes from last season to this season in his approach to the game?
Well, I mean, I've seen a few wrinkles, but, look, Steve Spagnuolo runs a very aggressive defense. You got to remember where he, quote unquote, grew up in as a coach, and that was under,
Jimmy Johnson.
Yes, Jimmy Johnson at Eagles, the Eagles defensive coordinator from years back, who ran a very aggressive style, and that's where Spagnuolo basically got his feet wet. So I hate to use the word bully because I don't like the word and I don't like the concept behind it, but this is a defense that is not going to take any garbage from the offense. I mean, it was interesting. We were while watching the game, I don't know if this was shown on TV, for example, but there was a one play where Olivier Vernon was bent backwards by Greg Robinson on Monday night, and Vernon jumped up and he took a swipe at Robinson's helmet. He just got in his face and smacked him. I don't know if it was shown on TV, and I know it wasn't called. I saw an official go running over there to kind of, stop any retaliation by Robinson. But, this is what you've got. You've got a bunch of guys. They're all sweethearts off the field, but put them on the field. They're very aggressive. They are very territorial. That God forbid you get in their way or cross that line and get into their territory. So I like it. They're also very confident. And Spagnuolo, what I love about Spagnuolo is he's not afraid to get creative. We saw one look last week, for example, where he had three safeties, 3 cornerbacks, and 1 linebacker. That was a new wrinkle. That was very interesting. So he's trying new things, and he's not afraid to adjust things. I mean, I think when you talk about guys who make adjustments, Spagnuolo is right up there as being the king of adjustments, because this man can literally go to the sideline with his whiteboard and his marker, draw something up right there on the spot, show it to the defense, go out there and run it. It's just beautiful to watch.
He's got to be really happy because he's got players that can play man coverage when he does bring in the blitz. He's got great players on that defensive line. And what about this kid Cockrell that they brought in off of waivers, who I thought played a pretty phenomenal game in coverage on Sunday night?
Cockrell they actually acquired in a trade. I think
that was a trade. Oh yeah, it was a round trade. Yes,
from Pittsburgh for a 7th rounder, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, Cockrell, you're right. He came in, had himself a decent game, first time out. But, you got to remember something. When a player comes in that late, he doesn't have the benefit of the off season where they do the installs, where they teach the overall broader philosophies behind things. And every year when I talk to a player who is coming back into his second year with the team, I say, how much more of a difference does it make for you now that you've had that full off season? And they say it's like night and day because, again, they can understand the philosophies behind what they're being asked to do as opposed to, the game plan, which is just a small fraction of the overall philosophy.
Mm-hmm. He played well man coverage, though. I guess that's why they never put him in the slot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, Jim V. You know Jim V. He's an old friend of yours, right?
Yes, love Jim V.
We all love Jim V.
Yes.
Jim V. stated, and I agree, that this last game was a winnable game without the mistakes and the lack of execution. How do you see the Giants coming out this week in Philadelphia? Do they turn the tide?
I sure hope so, because I'm telling you, my Twitter, mentions, wow, I feel like I did something wrong, and I didn't even play the darn game, Now, all seriousness, Ben McAdoo today in his press conference kind of gave a little insight into the thinking and the mindset in the locker room, and that basically is us against the world. Everybody's writing us off because we're 0-2. Everybody thinks we stuck. So therefore, we're going to come out, and we're going to come out swinging, and we're going to fight. We're going to stick together, and we're not going to go down without a fight. So that's the attitude and the approach that I think he is trying to get them to buy into. And, on an early take, that seems to be what a lot of the players are reiterating. Now, we all know that a great coach once said, talk is cheap, play the game. I can't remember who it was. I mean, maybe you can remember who that coach was. Some guy by the name of Coughlin, maybe? I don't know. But yeah. But see, here's the thing. I mean, the Giants haven't won in Philadelphia now. I think it's 3 years. They last won it, I want to say, 2013. And they've had a couple of blowouts since then in Philly. which hasn't really been a fun place for them to play in. Heck, it's not a fun place to go to at all. I mean, I go there, and even though I don't have any kind of markings as to designate who or what I am, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm like, God, please let me get in and get out of here without, incident. Yeah, the attitude, it's early in the week, and I think, and I'm still trying to get a better feel for this, and I'll probably have a better feel later in the week, but so far it looks like no one is down. It doesn't look like anybody is saying, oh, woe is us, we're 0-2, we're not going to be able to bounce back. They know they made mistakes. Everybody says the usual, oh, what we did is correctable, and we will correct it. Again, talk is cheap. Let's see them do it. But the optimism is there. I don't think this locker room is broken. I don't think it's split. I think McAdoo has done a good job to keep the spirits up and keep them together. I think it also helps that, and I know this was brought up, even though nobody has told me, but, I'm sure it was mentioned to the players that the team that was just honored on Monday night, the 2007 championship team,
right,
started out 0-2 before making a run. So that's probably sitting in the back of the players' minds. So all is not lost yet. I think if they suffer a bad loss to the Eagles, then it's going to be interesting to see because, as you all have seen, the heat's starting to turn up on McAdoo. The writers, the TV commentators, they're starting to roast the man. And if he doesn't get this fixed and get it fixed in a hurry, it's going to get worse.
Well, hopefully Tom Coughlin spent a few minutes with him and said, listen, the sports writers in this town fired me 5 or 6 times, and I was resilient. So we won 2 Super Bowls after that. So, hopefully that's the message there. But anyway, thank you, Patty. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the listeners? Anything you want to touch on?
The only other thing I'd like to add, if I may, is unfortunately I haven't been able to get over to Big Blue Huddle as much as I would like to, and I haven't forgotten about y'all. Just been very busy. When you've got 3-4 publications you got to juggle, there's really not a whole lot of time, unfortunately, to write. And then also, you got to try and spend time with your family and everything like that. But I do often think about the board. I appreciate you guys asking questions. I appreciate you reading, what I put out there. And always, feel free to hit me up on Inside Football through letters to the editor if you have a question. You can hit me up on Twitter at Patricia_Traina. And I will do my best to answer you. I know sometimes people say, well, I asked you a question and I didn't get an answer. Probably don't want to ask me a question during the game when my mentions are going a mile a minute.
Right.
So, but, do feel free to reach out to me. I do try and answer your questions as best as I can. And I enjoy it. And I want to thank you for having me on. And I want to thank everybody who submitted questions. Much appreciated and very good questions. I hope I answered them all, well enough.
You absolutely did. It's a real pleasure talking with you and having you on a podcast, and I know the members all appreciate it. And we've started to develop a following on this podcast, and even the folks that are outside of the realm of the Big Blue Huddle, I'm getting a lot of hits on that too. So, can you just tell the fans where they can follow your work, please?
Sure. As I mentioned, I write for several different publications, but my base is InsideFootball.com. That is a publication that I own. So, all subscription money that we take in not only helps me pay the bills, but it also helps offset the costs that I incur to, go up to the stadium, to go on the road, to do all the things that I can do to bring you the coverage and be accessible and, answer your questions. You can also find me at Bleacher Report. I write twice a week for them, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For those of you in southern and central Connecticut who get the Journal-Inquirer, I'm back writing for them. My articles usually come out on a Saturday. I usually do a preview for them. And then for those of you outside of the tri-state area, Sports Exchange is a wire service. So if you Google by Patricia Traina and put Sports Exchange as your your keywords, chances are you will see some of what I have done for Sports Exchange. You can also go to sportsexchange.com to see things like my report cards, to see my game previews. Those, unfortunately, don't have my bylines, but they're stuff that I am writing. So a lot of places where you can find my work if you want to.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And you can catch the Big Blue Huddle at giantsfans.net. This is Ed on behalf of Patty Traina and myself. We want to thank you for listening in. And again, I want to thank Sid and DuPont. I want to thank Dale, AP44. I'd like to thank Bert the Chief, Mitch Bahama Fan, MP21, London Blue, Bob in PA, Tim T200, and the immortal Jim V, for some input, and also for Rich and Brian who aren't here because, again, I thought of this last minute and I apologize, but I didn't get. I wanted to get this thing going because I know, we had a tough time hooking up today ourselves. We just got this slot. You were able to give this to me. It was tough for you today. Tomorrow, Friday is no good for me, and then we got the weekend and the game starts again. So again, thank you very much, Patty. It's been a real pleasure.
Same here. Thank you for having me.